Hi, everybody. Welcome to our virtual Partnership for Excellence. I'm Palmer Jackson Jr., Chair of the Partnership for Excellence and also Chair of the Santa Barbara Foundation Roundtable. This is our 26th year, it's hard to believe, of convening Santa Barbara County nonprofits and foundations. And during all those years, we've been sponsored generously by the members of the Foundation Roundtable here in Santa Barbara. The Roundtable is composed of about 35 community and private foundations, and we fund projects and organizations throughout our county. A big thank you to our 2020 sponsors, and you'll see them listed on the PFE homepage for this event. Like so many other events, we were sadly forced to cancel our in-person gathering at the Alice Hour Ranch that was supposed to happen this past April. Now, our hope is that this three-part virtual series is to reconnect our social sector colleagues and partners at a time when community interactions are limited and we're working in new ways under extreme conditions. Today is our second in the series, and it's designed to bring us together in networking and conversations around our theme, Nonprofits Uniting for Sector Health and Advocacy. A few thank yous I want to start off with. I want to thank the Nonprofit Resource Network, our PFE Advisory Council, Judy Hawkins and Ruby Road Leadership, Visionality, A Busy Woman Consulting, Life Chronicles as well. For today's program, we want to thank the Nonprofit Council, our featured community leaders, and interviewer, Alana Walczak of CALM, and more than 10 community volunteers from the Nonprofit Council who will host our breakout conversations today. So now I'd like to turn things over to our PFE producer and excellent friend, Judy Hawkins, to share an overview of the day in our virtual event space. On behalf of the Foundation Roundtable, please enjoy the program and welcome.
Thank you, Palmer, and welcome everyone. As he said, to the second Partnership for Excellence in this three-part series. Today's program is similar to a Zoom webinar, which you might be familiar with by now. And this part of the program, only our speakers have access to their microphones and cameras. But you can see, you have a sneak preview on your screen of the wonderful leaders who are going to be joining us in conversation this morning. On your screen now, you'll also see on the far right at the top that you can post in the chat, and that would be viewable for everyone who is in the audience right now. We won't be using the polling or the Q&A on that same tab, but in the breakout conversations later, you'll be in small groups to interact about this topic and from the interview information that you hear today. If you have any technical issues or questions, please just post them in that live chat feed, and our Visionality team will help you right away. They're on hand throughout this entire program to be of assistance. So no silly questions. Please just ask if you're having any trouble. Our schedule today is this morning's program. The interview program will be about an hour. So it'll last until about 10:45. And then you will move into breakout rooms to join 35 to 40-minute conversations. That's where you'll get a chance to bring your ideas and questions. And the program will end after those breakouts at 11:30 and transition into networking time. So then we'll have a noontime networking where you can take advantage of the platform. We'll give you more information about how to do that later. So as you enter today, I just want to invite you to, in recognition that we are all coming from such different and complicated places right now in the sector. So many of us working tirelessly around, so many of our community members, so many of our community issues, and overwhelm and shifting and changing, new opportunities, new stressors. So we are welcoming you together today under the umbrella of the Partnership for Excellence to come together, to see each other, this talented, values-driven nonprofit workforce, all of you who are so passionate and big-hearted in everything that you bring to our communities. So today we just invite you to let go of whatever it took to get here. And I know that's a lot. Now more than ever before, it's just so common to have back-to-back commitments. And so your time here today is appreciated, and we hope that it will bring value and insights and new ideas for you as well. So to listening, and we welcome you together as the nonprofit social sector community of Santa Barbara County. So today's program, our theme, as Palmer shared, Nonprofits Uniting for Sector Health and Advocacy, is inspired by you, by the power and strength of this sector to innovate, to expand, to recover, and to serve the emerging needs in our communities that you do every day. And so we hope you had a chance this morning or earlier to view the interview that Alana Walczak did with California State Assembly member Monique Limon. That kind of set the tone and the stage for today's conversation. If you didn't get to that, that's okay. You'll catch up quickly. And just imagine what could happen if critical community decisions included nonprofit voices, our insight, our leadership. What might it look like if our sector truly impacted decision-making and resources? How might a nonprofit council represent organizations' interests and focus our collective place at the table? Today's program is going to explore some of those questions. The program will be in 3 parts. The first is an introduction to the vision of the Emerging Nonprofit Council. The second are live interviews with 3 wonderful community leaders who are sharing their perspectives. And the third will be breakout conversations where you can contribute your ideas, your insights, your questions about the council that will inform its next steps. And there'll be more details about that later. So now let's welcome our speakers from the Nonprofit Council. First, Alana Walczak, CEO and President of CALM, and Luke Swetland, CEO and President of the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History and the Sea Center. After their introduction, Alana will be interviewing 3 esteemed leaders: Gregg Hart, Santa Barbara County Supervisor; Gloria Soto, Santa Maria City Council; and Steve Ortiz, CEO of United Way of Santa Barbara County. Alana and Luke, take it away.
Great, thank you, Judy. Welcome, everyone. I just want to start by really amplifying the points that Judy just made. So Alana and I are here to talk about the Nonprofit Council. Well, that sounds like a pretty grand thing, but in reality, it's just what Palmer said. It's 10 volunteers from diverse nonprofits across the entire county who have been in discussions for the last year or so. And I'm going to start with our origin story. Here's some important data points, folks. The nonprofit sector is the 4th largest employer in this county. In California, 1 in 14 jobs are in nonprofits, and our sector contributes 15% of the state's economic output. That's huge. We collectively play a leadership role that helps hold our communities together. We step in when the public or the private sectors can't or won't. Throughout our nation, our sector is fundamental to the health and well-being of families, communities, and all aspects of our daily lives. We mobilize resources in service to our deepest values, and we're called to lead when innovative solutions are needed to address the most complex challenges of our time. But despite the important role we play, nonprofits often lack the power to create the change needed to better serve their clients and their own organizational interests. So why is this? Now, there are many affinity groups in the nonprofit world. The museum directors chat with each other, the performing arts folks chat with each other, and that's all important, and they're all doing great work. But through discussions at the Executive Director Roundtable, it became clear to all of us that there was no sector-wide leadership, and therefore, quite likely, there was little sector-wide consensus on what matters most to us as nonprofits. And absent leadership and consensus, it begs the question, how can we make our voices, our needs, and our contributions be heard in a more clarion, unified, and sustained way with funders and with policymakers? And so, with the blessing of the Executive Director Roundtable, the Council, under Alana's leadership, we've been doing a lot of thinking about the sector, and we're here today to report back on our discussions and to ask you three things. One, do you think this idea of a sector-wide organizing effort is important? And if it is, number two, what should we be focusing on? Now, we have three priorities that we kind of landed on, and Alana's going to talk about those in a moment. Are those the right priorities? And then third, if this is important, if those are the right priorities, how do we best organize ourselves? And who among you would like to get involved with us in this effort? So to get your important feedback on those 3 points, as Judy said, we'll be having breakout sessions. Please don't bail on us, folks. We really want to hear what you think, because this is only going to go as far as you all help us take it. And now, to share with you the priority areas that we think merit some discussion today, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Alana.
Thank you so much, Luke. It's really exciting to be here. This whole idea of a nonprofit council started back in March of 2019. So we're coming up on about 1.5 years since that very first executive roundtable where this idea was born. And it's really quite exciting to be able to present this to the sector as a whole, to get your input and to get hopefully your buy-in that we're moving in the right direction. So as Luke said, we were tasked with determining if there was a role for an overarching group that might be able to speak on behalf of the nonprofit sector, convene on behalf of our sector, and ideally and hopefully advocate on behalf of our sector. So we created an executive summary that I hope most of you have seen by this point, to really focus our work in 3 areas, as Luke has said. So the first is data collection and analysis. So really our attempt in this focus area is to collect, analyze, and disseminate data about our sector, both to establish metrics about the demographics and the makeup of our sector, as well as some of the challenges we face. We also hope to use that data to measure our progress, both on particular issue areas, but as an overarching collective sector. So some examples of what this might look like are potentially partnering with Peter Rupert, the executive director of the Economic Forecast Project out at UCSB, to comprehensively incorporate nonprofit data into the analysis of our local and regional economies, not as a side note or as an afterthought or those cute little nonprofits and what are they doing over there, but really as a core part of the functioning of our economy. Another example of how we might use data, and this is something near and dear to my heart because I'm dealing with this at Calm right now, but gathering benchmarked compensation data for agencies that we are in such short supply of data related to salary survey information that's timely. And we are having difficulty, some of us, recruiting and retaining staff because we don't have accurate compensation data. But perhaps a body like this could help to organize something that would benefit the sector as a whole. So as Luke said, we were formed out of the Executive Director Roundtable. So we reported back to them in September with where we were. And after that meeting, we sent out a survey to get more information. So on this first focus area, of the respondents to that survey, 85% felt that this focus area was important or very important. Some suggestions that were made is that perhaps this area of focus could look at where the money comes from in our sector, how much we leverage into our county, and then also what some of the outputs are as a whole. There was also a request for perhaps some qualitative data tracking partnerships and collaborations in addition to economic and demographic data. And there was also just a sense that we should not be duplicating data that already exists, but rather the emphasis could be placed on bridging state and regional data and making it more relevant to the local arena. The second area of focus that we wanted to, or that we thought the Nonprofit Council could focus on, was sector impact communication. So really creating tools and strategies to communicate the power and the relevance and the impact of the work, both of individual nonprofits, but again, also of the sector as a whole. So this is really a marketing and communications function. It could be working with print media to do a multi-issue series, or maybe Cox to create a PSA about issue areas that are important to the nonprofit sector. Again, it could feature different agencies, but the headline, the banner, would be about the power of the collective. So again, in that survey we sent out after the ED Roundtable, 62% of folks thought that this was an important area of focus. There was some concern about the fact that many organizations at an individual level are already pushing out stories of their work. But our question at the council is, could we amplify that? Could we expand those messages? Yes, about the great work each agency is doing, but start to paint the picture that we are part of a broader movement, part of a broader sector. There are community needs entirely met by the work of the nonprofit sector. Could we tell that story? Could we talk about the efficiency, the agility of the nonprofit sector at all times, but especially in times of crisis, which we've seen over and over in recent years? And could we use this platform, this marketing platform, to emphasize the data that we would collect if we focused on that in focus area number 1? And then the third area of focus, as we think of it, is really mobilization and advocacy. Mobilizing individuals, organizations, and entire systems in support of policies and practices that enhance the effectiveness of the nonprofit sector, but in so doing, really advance critical issue areas for the health and well-being of our communities. So this is representing the sector as a whole in front of legislative bodies, policy-setting bodies, rule-making bodies, not just as individual agencies, but again, as a collective. Some of this work would be reactive if there were proposed funding cuts, let's say, but some of it could really be proactive, helping to lay a policy framework for the nonprofit sector. In the survey we sent out back in September, 77% of respondents felt that this was a critical focus area for us. Some of the feedback we received was really developing the specific policy agenda with specific policy issue areas. Some of what was suggested, and this mirrored some of what our council had been discussing, was a focus on workforce housing, a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a focus on health care of our employees, both physical health and emotional health. There was a sense that a council might be able to help organizations really understand what advocacy is and isn't, and really start to educate the sector that we can play in this sandbox, that there is a role for us with respect to advocacy, and turning people out to support policy agendas, not only when it matters to your individual organization, but wouldn't it be great if I could show up on behalf of something that Luke's organization cared about, and Luke could show up for something that Calm cared about, and we could work more collaboratively across issues on behalf of the entire sector. So that's a quick summary of what we are thinking we want to work on. And the reason, again, that I'm really excited to be here today is that we want to engage more feedback. We want to know if this idea has legs underneath it. Was this just a lovely passion project of mine and of the 9 other people that I've been working with? Or could there be real value for our sector over time? So as Judy said, I now have the honor of talking with 3 amazing community leaders. They're going to talk to us about their thoughts related to the council, whether this would be helpful to them. And then, as Luke said, please don't bail on us at about 10 till 11, about an hour from now or so. We're going to go into a breakout room, and we really want to hear from you. What are your reactions? What do you think? What are you excited about? What are you left thinking about? Because we really want to engage your thinking as this continues to develop. So to begin our community conversation, I'd love to ask Supervisor Hart to join me here on the stage, I guess we're on, and talk a little bit more about the council. Hi, Gregg. Nice to see you.
Good morning, Alana. Thanks for inviting me. It's wonderful to be here with everybody.
Well, I just want to thank you. I know that you represent the Board of Supervisors and the county, and you are such a critical partner and funder for many of us in our work on behalf of the nonprofit sector. So thank you for being here. And as a way to start,
my pleasure. I really want to thank the.
Sorry, my internet.
That's okay. Am I lagging there?
I don't know. One of us is glitching.
It might be my end. We'll work through it.
Well, I'll start off with some questions for you and how a council might support you or help you in your role. But first, I just want to share that you have a really diverse professional background that folks may not be aware of. I knew many of these pieces, but I didn't know all of them. But you owned and operated a child care center for almost 2 decades, which I didn't realize. That is near and dear to my heart. So thank you for that work. You've been a planning commissioner, a coastal commissioner. You worked as a staff assistant for state assembly member Jack O'Connell. You were a city council member, SB CAG, and now on the Board of Supervisors. So I guess my first question is, with that diverse array of experience, you have worked with multi-stakeholder groups probably across your career. I'd love to hear any experiences you have with that, of where there have been successes. And I'd also love to hear, in your role as a policymaker, how might having this kind of a nonprofit council, this collaborative collective, be of benefit to you? Do you think it would be of use to you?
Yes, I'm very excited about the prospect. I think there's tremendous power with the idea, and I would encourage everybody to go full speed ahead. I'm really excited that the Partnership for Excellence and the Santa Barbara Roundtable are supporting this effort, and it's wonderful and inspiring to see so many people here this morning, virtually, but together, trying to figure out a way to amplify the impact and the voice of the nonprofit sector in our community. We are so fortunate in Santa Barbara County to have such a wealth of amazing leaders running incredible organizations that are doing the most important work in our community. And I fully understand how important that is, to be a partner with local government. Your very kind introduction described a lot of years, a lot of different experiences. But I can say without hesitation that community collaborations are the way big things get done. And they can be done well, and they can be done poorly. And I've seen them all. And a couple things that come to mind immediately were back in 2000, I authored Measure B, which was when I was on the Santa Barbara City Council. It was the Clean Creeks Initiative. And it went to the voters and was ultimately successful in raising the transient occupancy tax from 10% to 12% and dedicating that extra revenue to cleaning up our creeks and beaches. And if you remember at the time, we were having terrible problems with creek runoff, closing the beaches for months at a time. And the community was very engaged in this issue, wanted a solution, but there were a lot of stakeholders in the problem. There was the visitor serving organizations, the hotels and restaurants, that were all affected by the transient occupancy tax. There was the Clean Creeks advocacy groups like the Community Environmental Council and the Urban Creeks Council and others. And we had to get everybody together to figure out a plan and then convince the voters by a 2/3 margin to support that. And that's not easy, but by working patiently and persistently and collectively, we came up with a compromise. and it was successful, and it has resulted in tremendous improvement. We don't see the beach closures, that come from storm runoff that we used to be plagued with anymore. Certainly not to the same extent. And a side benefit of that has been the acquisition of the hundreds of acres of public open space in the Las Positas Valley and in watersheds throughout the city of Santa Barbara that are long-term permanent protections for habitat and recreation that are really important assets. And another equally complex long-term challenge was governance in Isla Vista. When I was a student at UCSB, I was actually an Isla Vista Community Council member, and the struggle to provide self-determination to the residents of Isla Vista is 40 years or more long. But most recently, my colleague on the Board of Supervisors, Doss Williams, when he was in the state assembly, led a state legislative effort to finally create a path to establish the Isla Vista Community Services District. And that was another 5-year process in its implementation, involving hundreds of stakeholders in the Isla Vista community, meeting weekly to talk about what were the options and the positives and negatives, meetings over pizza, which is the classic organizing tool, getting people together, having conversations, and moving the dialogue forward to the point where there was a consensus. And it actually took 2 elections, one to create the Isla Vista Community Services District as a result of the bill that Doss was able to get through the legislature, AB 3, and then a subsequent election at the local level to provide the funding source to make the Isla Vista Community Services District happen. But both of those examples involve direct hands-on community organizing and those steps could never be replaced. They are always critical and essential to being successful. So having the Nonprofit Council as an entity to be a convening place to advance those ideas, an incubator for creative ideas that can be acted on collectively, is really a smart investment in all of our futures.
Yay. So glad to know that you endorse that, because as you say, there's so much organizing, there's so much relationship building, and we want to help convene those relationships to hopefully move processes forward in an efficient and effective way. So, and I appreciate you sharing some of those examples, because I think it really helps anchor what right now is this philosophical vision of what we're hoping to accomplish. But what we want to engage is real practical on the ground work that influences policy and really helps to create policy that benefits the sector, but ultimately benefits our constituents and the folks that live in our county. In your role as a member of the Board of Supervisors, I'm sure that a plethora of issues come at you every single day, or I know that's true. I know that's true, on a wide array of topics. And I think some parts of our community have representative bodies that speak for them. So for example, the for-profit community has chambers of commerce. Wineries have the Vintners Association. But we currently don't have something like that represents the nonprofit community. So I would imagine that you rely on individual relationships that you have with individual leaders within the nonprofit community, or relationships you have with particular organizations. And I'm just wondering, how might a collective body like a nonprofit, and so you can correct me, maybe you have some other way of getting information and input from the nonprofit sector at this point, because I am not aware of one, and if there is one, I should be plugged into it. But how might a council help you in your role as a policymaker by providing you access to a collective body rather than relying on individual relationships here and there?
Well, you're right. I'm really fortunate to have been here and had leadership roles for a long time. So I do have direct relationships. I'm looking through the list of participants in the meeting today, and I know virtually everybody and have worked with everyone for years. So that helps me in my work. But I think that the ability to amplify the voices and to concentrate the impact of the nonprofit sector from a policy advocacy standpoint is I can't be overestimated how important that could be to the board, because not everybody who serves in elected leadership in the different areas of our county has that long-term relationship with people. So I think, that is changing dramatically. We have a whole bunch of new young elected officials representing our community and doing a wonderful job, but having that organized systemic means of communication to government leaders is more important than ever. Resources are becoming more constrained. We're all dealing with the financial fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic and the ripple effect to all of our organizations. So being leaner and meaner and stronger and more passionate is really critical at this moment in time. So one of the things that I think that the Nonprofit Council ought to consider as part of their charge is to do the cross collaboration that has been talked about for decades in our community. We have hundreds of nonprofits that are doing fabulous work. Some of that work is coordinated, some of that work is not coordinated. And I think that the council could be a vehicle to begin to have those conversations to better align the needs with the abilities and the resources in a more efficient way. And I think that would be an enormous help to the community, to the people that rely upon the services that all the nonprofit community organizations bring. And it would be a big assistant to the county of Santa Barbara. I really know and understand deeply how valuable the nonprofit sector is to our ability at the county to deliver services to constituents, because we're able to take our public tax dollars and leverage them that much more with the generosity of community members. You know, we wouldn't be able to do half the things that are being done in our community without the nonprofit sector. So your role is critical. The more you can organize, the more you can collaborate, the more you can cooperate, and the more you can focus that message and amplify it to government leaders, the better off we're all going to be.
Yeah, as you say, I mean, we do this in partnership. And Luke shared it as well. We live and work in a multi-sector community, and there's a role for the for-profit community, there's a role for the public community sector, and then there's a role for the social sector, the nonprofit sector. But we work so closely with government, amplifying the work and really creating an efficient and effective utilization of resources. So that's our goal, is to build an even stronger partnership and hopefully to build this collective body, this collective repository of information, if you will, to be available before we're needed, so that before a policy decision is needed to be made, that there is this entity that could be, met with or talked with, or could be pushing out information to individual nonprofit agencies that could benefit a more collaborative policymaking process. So our hope is to kind of get ahead of that. Again, as you say, you're in such a unique position having your years of relationships, but newer electeds may not have that depth of relationships. So being able to rely on a collective entity, I think, could be really, really valuable. Another thing and this is truly a personal curiosity, but hopefully others watching today find this interesting, but I know that oftentimes nonprofits advocate on policy issues when it's of interest to them. When there's a funding decision for a particular nonprofit agency, they're going to show up at a Board of Soups meeting and ask not for those cuts to happen. Mm-hmm. But how might a council help to build discourse between the nonprofit sector and the government sector in a less transactional way, in a more systemic way? I know that I need to come in front of you if there's a decision on behalf of Calm being made at the Board of Supervisors level. Of course I do. But I would think if there were others from other organizations that could show up in support of my need, or in support of a policy issue, we could really move this relationship again from transactional to more collaborative and systemic. So what are your thoughts about that?
I think that's a brilliant question, and I think it is the key to what we need to be talking about. Better cementing the partnership between government and the nonprofit sector at an earlier stage in the policy development conversation. As you described, most often than not, an item will be coming to a decision-making body, and then we'll ask for public comment, and we'll have people engage, and there'll be a discussion and a result. The more effective strategy is to convene people earlier where more creativity can come into the conversation. Different models can be explored and tested before we even get to the stage of having a defined and refined policy choice before the Board of Supervisors. And I would hope that that will be a space that the Nonprofit Council would really leap into, as, how can we have earlier conversations with the key city, county staff at the foundational level to talk about how we're trying to solve these big picture problems. The County of Santa Barbara is involved in an initiative to kind of redesign how it serves our constituents in the county called Renew 22, where we're really looking at all of our systems and reopening the boxes and deciding, how can we do business differently? And I think one of the key challenges for us as an organization at the county is to do that work and reach out more to the nonprofit sector and say, where are new partnerships that we don't even conceive of today that can be more effective, serve more people, more financially, in a more financially viable and equitable way. So I think, when you think about all the big issues that we're facing, housing, homelessness, health, all of these areas demand more creativity, more collaboration, and more services and help to our community. So the marriage between the nonprofit sector and government is critical, and doing that early through a council so that we can, because it's all about communication. How can we communicate what government is looking to do and what the nonprofit sector is looking to do and what we both can do better together? How can we communicate that earlier, more effectively, to better result for our community? That's what we're all in this together to do. And I think that's a wonderful role for the Nonprofit Council to serve.
Yeah, I just wholeheartedly, honestly, at the end of the day, it all comes down to relationships and how strong those relationships are, how honest we can be with one another, what mechanisms we have in place for information sharing and discourse. And so if we could, as you say, start that earlier, before a decision has to be made immediately, it would just benefit our agencies, but it's going to benefit our community. And again, the nonprofit sector, we're relied upon often to be a source of creativity and innovation. We're the place when government can't figure it out and the for-profits don't want to deal with it, we figure it out and we innovate. But so if we could be doing that in a more proactive and collaborative way across the aisle with other sectors, how much more beneficial that will be. So I hope, obviously this is something that I strongly believe in. So I hope that this gains traction, and I hope that a council will be able to work with you and your colleagues at the Board of Supervisors really to engage proactive policymaking. So here's to the future, I guess.
Well, I'm ready and willing and able and encouraged by this morning's conversation. And I can only think that there's going to be tremendous result from having everybody collaborate, get together like this. And I want to just encourage everybody. Thank you, Alana. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Luke. And thank you, Palmer, for taking the leadership to make this such a great, wonderful event. Look forward to hearing everybody else.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for taking time this morning. We really appreciate it. And now I'm going to segue us to our next speaker. I have the honor of welcoming Santa Maria Councilmember Gloria Soto to the stage. Hi, Gloria. Nice to see you.
Hi. Good to see you.
By way of introduction, I think probably everyone on this call is aware of who you are because you are a fierce, dynamic woman who is doing so many great things. But I know that you have some core issues that are really important to you: affordable housing, living wage jobs, and really providing strong opportunities for young people in Santa Maria, but throughout our communities. And I think I'm really excited that you are one of the folks that I get to talk with today because you not only work in the nonprofit sector, you're a longtime employee of Planned Parenthood working as their major gifts officer. You also are an elected official as a council member, but you've also volunteered in the nonprofit sector, serving on boards for the Fund for Santa Barbara, the Future Leaders of America. And I think you play so many different important roles as advocate and organizer. So I'm really, really, really grateful that you're here. I think you're going to offer lots of wisdom from many different perspectives. So thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And so I guess I'll get started just by saying, we're trying to create a countywide nonprofit council. And in your elected role, you serve as a council member for the city of Santa Maria, for the Santa Maria Valley. So how do you think a countywide nonprofit council would benefit you? Do you think it would benefit you at your local level in your role as a council member?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I think it's important to start by noting that the political landscape in the city of Santa Maria differs greatly from South County. And so oftentimes I find myself in the minority seat. And so when it comes to pushing for policies that will directly impact the lives of our residents, I find myself struggling finding data. Data that I would be able to use to make my points, to make my case. Because for me, it's not just showing up to a council meeting and knowing that my colleagues have the same values as I do, or that they see the world through the same lens as I do. And so really needing to make a case and really strategize on what points I'm going to hit is incredibly important for my in my job. And so having data that's easily accessible to elected officials will make a vast difference when it comes to advocating for the needs of the most vulnerable within our communities.
In your experience, have there been times when there have been policy decisions in front of you and you hadn't heard from the nonprofit sector? I'm sure that's happened many times, but if you could talk about perhaps how it would have been different had there been voices from the nonprofit community at the table, or at the virtual table now, but and how that might have influenced the outcome of a policy decision.
Yeah, so I know that during the interview with Supervisor Hart, there were that you all had a conversation about the importance of nonprofits having ongoing conversations with local elected leaders, and that couldn't be more true. It's incredibly important, but not just at a time when we're looking at distributing CDBG funds, but also during moments of critical policy issues that are coming before the elected body. So a great example of that is the eviction moratoriums that I was trying to push through in the city of Santa Maria. I knew that I had to be really strategic with how I reached out to community, to the nonprofit sectors, in hopes that they would be willing to come and speak during public comment to talk about the need for eviction protections for our residents in the city, especially during this time of COVID. And so it was disheartening to see that only 2 nonprofits were there advocating for those issues. And one of those organizations was Future Leaders of America, who we know is focused around education equity, but they saw that mass evictions would have dramatically impacted the students and the families that they serve. And so not just looking at issues that are around our missions, so to say, like not just issues that that particular nonprofit is always so used to focusing on, but really looking at it from a more broader perspective, and seeing how we can center the work that we do, our advocacy efforts, around those that we serve, rather than just on the particular items or areas that nonprofit focuses on, and really centering it around the folks that they serve. Another great example that I have is with community choice energy. We had CDC really working hard in Santa Maria to ensure that the city would join this community energy aggregate program, and luckily, with their support, we were able to get this through in the city of Santa Maria. A big win, where now folks are going to be able to receive carbon-free green energy. And so it was a historic win for our city, and something that I'm incredibly proud of, but I know would not have happened if it weren't for the nonprofit that came to bat for that issue.
Yeah, I think sometimes the nonprofit sector really is the pulse of what's going on for the constituency groups that we're serving. And I know we all get busy, and right now is such a busy time for so many of us in the sector. And so these meetings come up, and it's not always top of mind to show up for these meetings. And so a role that we're hoping the council could play is to just share information, to push out information about policy decisions that are coming up in places that agencies might want to come and speak about. I think sometimes also it can be intimidating. You know, if you haven't had that experience of connecting with an elected body, it may feel intimidating for some leaders. So really creating that access, because as you say, all of the issues are interconnected. You know, for me, working at Calm, our primary mission is to prevent childhood trauma and heal children, families. But the last part of our mission is to build resilient communities. And all of what we do is reliant on safe and affordable housing. It's reliant on good quality jobs for our families so that they have an economic engine for their household. And all of these things, that they have health care. So if I'm really going to be an advocate for my agency's primary mission, I also have to advocate on behalf of those issues and hope, and I won't be able to show up all the time, or Calm won't be able to show up all the time. But if we can amplify the message for the entire sector, hopefully other stakeholders can show up as needed.
Right. And I think, I mean, to those points that you just made, so often what I find is that the nonprofits are afraid of doing advocacy work, or they have an incorrect idea of what true community organizing looks like. And so oftentimes the reason why that is because they are afraid of ruffling feathers. You know, what will our what would the foundations think? What will our lead donors think? You know, or even just not having the clarity that they need around how much can a C3 do when it comes to advocacy and lobbying, right? Like, what are the legal limitations that they have? And so I think it's important, right, that nonprofit, that this council, as they begin this work, that they really start having honest conversations about how can we work ourselves out of a job. And the only way that we can do that is by tackling the root cause of the issues. You know, so often we are, you know, providing direct service, which is incredibly important, don't get me wrong, but we also need that advocacy piece, because again, if we want to work ourselves out of a job, we're going to need those shifts within the policymakers, and that's not going to happen unless we have the community organizing, mobilizing, and those advocacy efforts. And so far, it's only a very small handful of nonprofits that are doing that here in the county. And the majority of them are organizations of color. And so what can we do to really alleviate those pressures that those organizations have? But then also, as we are seeing during this time of COVID, the struggles that our residents and communities are facing are immense, and there is no way, even with the number of nonprofits that we have in the county, that the nonprofit sector alone will be able to fill the gaps in the needs of our residents.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, Gloria, I wish we had an hour just to talk with you, because you just brought up so many things that I want to follow up on, but I can't agree with you more about how few organizations are really tackling advocacy, because I think there is a lot of fear. There's fear there. And I will say, I know that funders are in the room, so to speak. They're listening here. And I would love for our sector to have a continued conversation about the role of advocacy, because there is so much room for organizations. And as you say, to really anchor the work. The social service work, or the provision of services, are absolutely critical for those in need and the most vulnerable in our community. But it doesn't have long-lasting impact if it's not rooted in a policy or a system change. And sometimes, oftentimes, maybe all the time, that requires advocacy. So I think we need funders and organizations to have a really honest conversation about that is important. That's how long-lasting change happens, and we shouldn't be afraid of it. And so I hope that can be a continued conversation even after today. And then another thing that you spoke of, I think there is a unique role for organizing and for advocating. And I know that you identify as an organizer, as an advocate. How might the council, do you think, perhaps bridge some of those differences? Being a nonprofit employee, being an elected official, being an organizer, those hats don't always play nicely with each other. There's tension between and among them. So I guess I have a twofold question. Like, one, thinking about all of those roles, how can the nonprofit council develop itself to embrace all of those roles? And then how can we bridge the differences among them?
Yeah, so I think it really starts. It starts with who's at the table. When I mentioned earlier that there are great differences between North County and South County, just in terms of, the makeup of the communities and political landscapes. And so often when decisions are being made, we're bringing in the CEOs, the executive directors from these nonprofit organizations, but we tend to forget that usually the organizations that are serving county-wide, their headquarters are oftentimes in Santa Barbara. And so that's where the EDs and the CEOs are headquartered at. And so they may not have a clear image of what's going on in other parts of the county. And so I think it's incredible, as you all are forming this council, I think it's incredibly important that you bring in folks from different parts of the organizations, right? That you have organizers, that you have folks who are providing the frontline service or care at the table, because they're really the ones who have their boots on the ground and their ears to the ground, and they're having these conversations with constituents, with residents, day in and day out. And so they are the ones who know exactly what the needs are and what we should be pushing for. And so in order to really be able to bridge these gaps, we need to have diversity within these decision-making bodies, whether it may be on the political side, whether it may be, within the nonprofit sector or within this council. I think that that's going to be incredibly important. And then also noting that there's going to be times when there's going to be tension, and how can we ensure that we are all working towards that same goal, and that even when there may be that tension, a little, some of that divide, that we can still remain unified and focused on providing the services and filling the gaps that our residents need.
Yeah, and I just want to acknowledge a couple things. One, to your point of having a diverse array of folks participating on the council, that's something that we're definitely talking about, because this initiative was born out of the Executive Director Roundtable. So this inaugural body is all executive leaders, but we've talked about the fact that we need other voices at the table as well. So folks that are closer to the work. So that'll be an ongoing focus area for us. And to your point of staying clear on a vision, but being able to have conversations that aren't always easy, that's how social change happens. We have to be able to dig in and have open and honest dialogue about really important issues if we're going to have lasting change. So I think that is definitely a critical value that we have for this work going forward. And I think it's a critical value of the nonprofit sector, because if we want to change lives, you have to be able to name what's really going on. And as you say, the root causes, getting to the root causes, not just putting Band-Aids on after the fact. So I think that is all the time we have. I've been prompted that I need to move on. So, but again, honestly, maybe you and I can just go and have coffee, because I have so much more to ask you about. But I'm so grateful that you joined us today. And I'm so grateful for your leadership in Santa Maria, but also for our county. So thank you for everything that you're doing, Gloria.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Enjoy your day. And now I want to welcome Steve Ortiz, President and CEO of United Way. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning.
How are you?
Doing well, yourself?
Doing very well. You're my third and final interview, so I feel great at this point. I think we're running low on time, so I think if it's okay with you, I might just jump into some questions with you. I know as the leader of the United Way here in Santa Barbara that you are part of a statewide and I believe a national network of United Ways. And so I would love for you to talk about how that network benefits you at the local level and at the regional level, how that support is a value add. And maybe if you can weave into your answer how you think a nonprofit council, that kind of collective body and that collected support might be of use for our nonprofit sector.
Sure. And I don't think it's a problem. We're short on time. I tend to be concise with my answers, so we'll get through it quickly. So first, I want to point out that United Way is a worldwide organization, but every United Way is independent. So there's some benefits to that. We get to share the benefits of a large network, but we get to do work independently and localized to the needs of our community, which is a huge support. Peter Drucker once called us the largest horizontal nonprofit organization just because of the way we are established. But the state association is a membership organization and advocacy organization for all 33 United Ways here in California. And primarily it helps tell the story to policymakers on key issues that United Way across the state cares about, whether it be health, financial stability, education. There are key areas that we focus on. It supports our members through marketing opportunities to learn across counties and nurturing collaboration and regional level that can impact both programmatic and revenue opportunities as well. So the state association looks at issues that potentially could develop a large-scale program across California, but also brings in large corporations like Bank of America, Target, and others who may want to support those programs across our counties in California. It's important to note that a few things about our work is relevant to to this council. Our association is very defined to the United Way membership. So we have common interests, values, and needs. And I think that is unique to the United Way system. It's clearly defined policy agenda drives our advocacy efforts overall. And we have a very target universe for those specific efforts overall. So some examples of what we've really pushed for recently through our network in both Sacramento and DC is call to action for the digital divide and distance learning. What can we do around those issues? Making earned income tax credits available to immigrants as well. And we advocated against the early termination of the census as an organization together. So when I look at the Santa Barbara County potential of having a nonprofit council, I know that there's enormous potential in the nonprofit sector. So that's number one. We have perspective experiences in leading some of our community's most important challenges and social issues. However, many times because of the way we are not coordinated, we rely on a very small group of the most available, the most trusted, and sometimes, unfortunately, the most popular organizations in our community. And I don't think that's the way it should be driven. If we spoke strategically about and more often in a single voice, we might be able to help move and change systems in a way that would better meet the needs of our most vulnerable residents and make us more just and equitable community.
I wholeheartedly agree with all of those words that you just shared. And I think one thing that's unique and why I wanted to interview you as part of this is that you hold a unique role in our community in that the United Way is both a funder, but you're also a service provider. And I think you've evolved into becoming more of a convener, working with the county, working with school districts, working with multiple stakeholders to really, as you say, engage on some of these critical issues, whether I know you've done a lot of work for essential workers and childcare issues, but digital divide issues, distance learning issues. So I guess could you talk a little bit, because I see the nonprofit council, this idea that we have at this point is that we will serve as a convening role for our sector. Hopefully that would be the hope, so that we can really engage in these systems change efforts. So if you could speak a little bit about your organizational evolution to become more of a convener and how you think that role of the council might benefit our communities.
Sure. So I came into United Way almost 16 years ago now, and I've been part of the evolution of the organization. And it was an evolution mandated by the transition in philanthropy, I would say, in general. We had to change to survive as an organization, but we maintained our roots as a funder as we started creating programming as well. I will say that, first off, collaboration takes time and resources. Most nonprofits are focused, as they should be, on their own programs and their own organizations, but true collaboration is hard work. And you can probably see that by all the gray hairs I'm getting in my sideburns and beards at this time. But we have to be realistic about that and set the tone with our potential partners. Many times the funders desire successful programs and outcomes from us, but rarely give a grant for the work it takes to build the models themselves. So that's something that we need to discuss as a community as well. And we know that effective collaboration and partnership, when that really happens, change truly happens and it's sustained over time. So it's key to impact, and we really need to address that specific need. These are all things we struggle with as we make decisions on whether to devote our time and resources to collaboration efforts or not. Sometimes we have to look internal and say that just will take us too long to develop, so let's just keep moving status quo. But ultimately, we make the deliberate decision to truly invest in and immerse ourselves in the work and results of that work, and then evaluate our steps and keep moving. So when I look at, again, the nonprofit council, how could the council improve collaboration? My honest answer is I don't know at this time. I need to see how this group gets focused. But what I do know is that there's huge potential. We have so many nonprofits here with key levels of expertise, experience, individuals who've been in the field for so many years, and we definitely need to tap into that as a network. A unified voice on a set of issues that leading organizations promote together could be really powerful and impactful. It would be a game changer for our community. However, I have seen a lot of things that get bogged down. A lot of projects get bogged down as people try to please or involve everyone in the community. And there you run the risk of being spread too thin if you just cast that web too wide. So this may sound controversial to some, but you need the right people at the table, not all the people. And that includes us as United Way. Sometimes we are not the right players for certain projects, and it's okay to step away from that and support those agencies that should be leading specific efforts. And that's hard for many organizations and leaders within organizations not to be at the table. But, for me, it's not that you're being dismissed or that your work is not being looked at as good for our community. It's simply for that specific project, you may not be the right organization to take that leadership position or to even be at the table. So let's be okay with that as we move forward.
Yeah, I think there has to be a focus on effectiveness. I've been saying this just within my own organization. How can we work smarter, not harder? There is so much coming at us in this COVID era, and we can't just do more. We have to think strategically about how we do it smarter. And so I think your comments about having the right people are really important. I wrote down the people pleaser. I mean, I think we're all probably people pleasers. We're all helpers. We get into the line of work we're in because we want to help make a difference. We want to help people. We want to make things better than we found it. But sometimes we can't please everyone. And so we're going to have to make strategic decisions. I also really appreciate your honesty of you don't know, because full disclosure, we don't know either, all of it. I mean, we know some, but that's why, I mean, I'm really excited about this conversation, because we want to get more brain power in the mix to really think about how this might work, and how we anchor this in. And I think we have to set egos aside. I think a big part of our work is setting egos aside and thinking about the bigger vision and what's going to get the job done. Again, potentially working smarter, not harder. So, as we think about this council, it is a joint effort between agencies and funders, but there has been a decision made that really it needs to be anchored by the agencies. We are welcoming of funders to join the council, but they won't be the majority, because this needs to be driven by those doing the work. So again, I think your comments about being really thoughtful about who and what we do is going to be critical, so we don't get bogged down, especially in this very overwhelming time. I know we only have like 2 minutes, but you've done so much work, and United Ways have done so much work in response to COVID, really convening folks both on funding disbursement, but also service delivery and partnerships with public health and others. I guess, how, in this new era that we find ourselves, any final comments you have about how a council might help in this new arena? And then I would also just ask, I know you have a crystal ball and you know the future, Steve, I know you do, but what are your thoughts about, based on all that you've done in recent months, what is your view of the future for our sector?
Yeah, our engagement with supporting an disaster and crisis really expanded during Thomas Fire, and our ability to connect with county to develop different programming that was really cross-sector for the first time and truly engaged. And we really expanded and strengthened that relationship during this pandemic. And then we were able to broadly bring in or coordinate with and collaborate with other funders, nonprofit organizations, to really support the needs. And it was all really based on assessment, not just thinking we knew what was needed for our community, but really having the conversations with the potential program participants, county officials, other nonprofits, funders, and their interests. And I think that needs to continue. The ability to have strong collaboration. I think the nonprofit council could be a holder of that, and making sure that when we're moving forward with projects, it's really about strong collaboration with a mindset that is unified in what we want to achieve, the outcomes we want to see for our community, and not just moving independently, coming together, having some conversations, and then going our own separate way and doing what we always do. And we saw clear signs of that, one, working with the county early on when we needed to house people who had COVID, but they didn't have the financial means to isolate from their homes. So we worked with the county to provide isolation and hotel rooms for people. We brought in a family service agency to help with contact tracing so we could figure out where the biggest issues were in our community. The Audacious Foundation approached us about the need for childcare for first responders back in April when everything was shut down. How can we support these doctors, first responders, to continue doing their work while everything is shut down? And their idea then came to us, and we expanded that with other funders, brought in an expert to support that. So I really think that what needs to live on is that spirit of collaboration, true collaboration, of quickly coming together, being extremely flexible. I think it was mentioned earlier, sometimes you engage in projects that may not seem immediately connected to your mission. But overall, our mission is to do good for our community, to change lives, to impact lives. So, at the end of the day, if you are supporting those efforts, it will support your mission as well, or connect to your mission. So we have to do that with a bigger open heart and open arms, and think that we can move quicker to address issues, maybe have fewer meetings to talk about the problems and actually take action, and start solving some problems in our community. And I think we'll do very well as Santa Barbara.
Are you a hater of meetings, Steve? What, you don't like meetings? Is that the takeaway from today?
I prefer to do.
I agree with you. And I think, as you said earlier, collaboration is hard. If you're doing it right, if you're really thinking about the culture of different organizations or of, nonprofits working with government, there are different cultures there. There are different approaches. And if you're really going to do true lasting collaboration, you have to dig into that. And that takes time and it takes relationship building. But that's ultimately how you anchor this in. So I think our future is bright. I've seen and I just truly, personally and professionally, want to thank you. You and your colleagues have done tremendously positive work in response to the pandemic, really mobilizing and convening, and we're all better for it. So we thank you for that. Thank you for taking time this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Enjoy the rest of your PFE experience. Come to my breakout.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. See you later. So I'll just quickly wrap up and then turn us over to those breakout group, or the one breakout group that we want you to come to. But I just truly want to thank all of the panelists that were with me today for taking time out of their busy schedules. I so appreciate their wisdom. I learned a lot. Actually, this was quite fun for me. And I just appreciate their commitment to the public good and the health and well-being of our county. So thank you, all of you, for joining us today. So now my colleagues on the council and I really do want to hear from you. So please stay on the call. Join us for the breakout session. I truly believe, as we've discussed, that if this idea is to gain traction, a nonprofit council, it has to be an effort of, by, and for the sector. So even though there's been a small group of us shepherding this forward, now's the time to really build momentum and engage all of you as we co-create it. So thank you for listening to this idea. It's 18 months of work brought us to this point, so we're really excited. And I just thank you in advance for your honest reflections and engagement. And I'll turn it over now to Judy, who's gonna provide us with all of our instructions of how we navigate the next little bit of our program. Take it away, Judy.
Thanks, Alana, and all of our speakers for being here with us this morning. I'd really like to acknowledge Alana's leadership, both in this PFE program today and stepping forward to really advance this vision for the Nonprofit Council. So up next, we have hosted breakout conversations, and these will be hosted by Nonprofit Council members who include Ben Romo, Sarah York Rubin, Pam Lewis, Eder Gaona Macedo, Alana Walczak, Shannon Seifert, Ashley Costa, Jeff Green, and Luke Svetland. So when you go to a breakout session, you'll be with one or more of those council members who will be helping to guide a conversation for your input about what you've heard about this morning, or maybe insights or things that came up as you listened to our community leader interviews. So just a few notes about the schedule for the rest of the day, and then I'll give you instructions for how to get directly to those breakout rooms. So these conversations will go from 10:50 until 11:30. And at 11:30, you are welcome to transition to our networking platform for noontime networking. Those will be open from 11:30 until 1 o'clock. And the entire site will be available to you until 3 o'clock today. So on your left side, you'll see some tabs. One of those is people. That's where you can connect with each other. You can send a connection message. You can chat directly. You could set up a video conversation like Zoom later today with anyone that you see on the platform. You can meet up in the lounges. So that's where our noontime networking will be. And all day you'll be able to enter into the PFE lounge and see anyone else who might be there. You can also click on one-on-one networking, and that's a quick connection with another attendee. So you'll be surprised and delighted to be connected with one other person for up to 3 minutes, just to say hello. We know that everyone is missing connecting with one another, so we really hope that you will stay in this space and utilize it this morning and this afternoon. And just a quick reminder, our third and final series in this PFE program, Partnership for Excellence, will be exploring diversity, equity, and inclusion for nonprofits. That program will be on Thursday, December 10th. And you can visit nprnsb.org or reply to any PFE email for registration information. And just a reminder, this will be the final free program for this year. So now for your breakouts. To reach the breakout room, you're going to go over to the left side of your screen and click on the button that says, guess what? Breakout rooms. And from there, there'll be 5 or 6 options for different council conversations. All the conversations will be based on the content from this morning, and each room is limited to 16 people. So you'll see a blue button that says join. If that button is not lit up, it just means that that room is full, and you can scroll down to a next room on the list to enter a breakout. Once you're in the breakout room, you'll be able to turn on your camera and your microphone so that you can participate in the conversations, and the volunteer hosts will welcome you there. They'll guide you into the opening discussion. If you need a break right now or between the program session and the noontime networking, we recommend that you go into, click into your breakout room, have your video off, and then take your break so that you have a place in that breakout room. If you have any questions, our event staff is on hand all day. They're very responsive and friendly. So please just check into the tech support if you need any help. Go enjoy your conversations. We'll see you around the platform, and hopefully also see you at noontime and networking in the PFE lounges. Thanks so much for joining us today.